the French have decided to stay out of that. But of course, we regularly update, we know what's happening, and this latest initiative by the French president, I think, is welcomed by all the countries involved, including the United States. And also the French made clear this has nothing to do with replacing the US nuclear umbrella. When it comes to your first question, without commenting on individual leaders, I have a very good relationship with Andrej Babiš. We know each other for many years. And I know that the Czech Republic is as committed as everyone to what we decided in The Hague. Czechia did not reach the 2% last year, but I know that the Czech government is working very hard to make sure that when it comes to a credible trajectory, it will be there.
Okay, we're going to go to the back now.
Thanks a lot, Thomas Gutschka with Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. I'm up here.
Yes, hi.
Yes, hi. A question on deprecision strikes. It appears that with the US decommitments to the NATO force model, this issue becomes front and center now of discussions among member states. Yet, 2 years ago in Washington, an initiative was already started by 4 countries, meanwhile 6. So far, we have seen nothing concrete from that. ELSA, it was called. So I'm wondering, does it need more steering from NATO? And what is your thinking about deprecision strike capabilities? How important is this, and what kind of capabilities does NATO need to develop, or European allies need to develop, to replace some of the US effects?
Thank you for that question. When it comes to the NATO force model, I've seen some reporting on numbers and all that. As you know, we never comment on that because we will never make our enemies wiser on what we are doing. So all that reporting, of course, that's the media. You can do that, but we will never comment on it because we want to make sure that we keep a maximum of secrecy and keep it a secret to what we are doing, etc. When it comes to concrete numbers. When it comes to DPS, of course, that is an important part of your overall portfolio of systems and weapons we have at our disposal as NATO. And there's always, when it comes to all these systems, there is a division of labor, who is doing what. I know the ELSA initiative, I know what the previous US administration agreed with Germany. So of course we are looking very much into that, trying to, wherever we can be helpful, to participate in those discussions. But also there, I have to tell you that I have to do that with a little bit holding back on telling you everything we are doing, because also here, this news press conference, of course, might also be listened in by the people to whom this might be directed, if necessary, when we have to defend ourselves.
All right, let's come over here, third row in TV.
Yes, Secretary General Gül from NTV Turkey. I have 2 short questions. So Max raised the timeline issue. There is a timeline issue with regards industrial production. At the time when US is scaling down its presence in Europe, European defense industries are like a bit like Chanel or Yves Saint Laurent. So the quality is tremendous, but the production is limited. So this is creating a gap, particularly for the appetite of Russia, a growing appetite for Europe. So do you think that in due course, 2-3 years, we are able to ramp up this production? And second question is with regard, for the last 6 months, there was some ups and downs in relations between the 2 sides of the Atlantic. Since now there is an agreement on Hormuz, do you think that the Ankara summit will be a kind of, you know, kiss and hugs amongst the ally or not?
Well, on the first question, we have that problem across the alliance. I don't mean the Chanel problem, but I mean the lack of defense industrial output. So I leave the Chanel comment with you, but when it comes to the overall defense industrial output, this is a problem for the whole of the alliance. The United States, Europe, Canada, we all are facing this issue because we are not producing enough. I have every confidence that with all the extra money coming in, look at the over 90 billion extra Canada and Europe spending on defense in 2025, which is really staggering, which is historical. And again, when I look at the numbers coming in for 2026, and we know that a big part of that will be spent on defense industrial output, this means that like in Turkey, where you have, I think, over 3,000 defense industrial companies, they know the market is there. The same for the German, the French, the Dutch, and all the other defense industrial bases in Europe and Canada and the United States. What I'm concentrating on is two things. One is to make sure that we ramp up the production. And yes, I'm confident that we will be able to do that in time to make sure we are strong. We are strong at the moment, but also in the mid and the longer term, we can defend every inch of NATO territory. The second thing I'm working on is to make sure that it's transatlantic. Because Europe cannot do it alone, the US cannot do it alone. We need each other when it comes to the investments, when it comes to the innovation, when it comes to making sure that you figure in the latest technologies, for example, learning from Ukraine on drone technology. We have to do this together. And also with Europe, it's important that countries like Turkey and Norway and the United Kingdom are participating as much as possible in what Europe as a whole is doing, again, in a transatlantic spirit. On your second question, this is a democratic alliance. That means you will always have debates, and that's what makes us so strong. But you also know that now for 77 years, we always come together and we find common ground. Because this is about our defense, which is task number one of every government. And we are there to defend the United States, Canada, Europe, to make sure that nobody could ever mount a successful attack against us.
Okay, let's come over here. Fourth row, Terry.
Thank you very much, Terry Schultz with
Hi,
DW. Hi. Are you concerned by reports most recently voiced by Kaja Kallas that China is training Russia, that the involvement of China is greater than was previously known? I mean, they're not. Is this lethal assistance or not?
We are constantly trying to follow exactly what China is doing. Of course, we know already that Russia is not alone, that they get vital support from North Korea, from China, from Iran, that these four countries are closely working together, and that there are mutual agreements, maybe not always legally on paper, but who is doing what for the other and what do you get in return. For example, when it comes to North Korea, they are getting vital ballistic missile technology from the Russians in return for their support for the war effort of Russia, this crazy war of aggression against Ukraine. When it comes to China, what we know, of course, is the sanctions circumvention, the dual-use goods, etc. We are not naive. We follow everything exactly. I cannot tell you more at this moment, or at least in this open press conference, but you can be assured that we follow every... yeah, so we have to do this in a private meeting, but then still you want to report it, so I might still have to hold back a bit.
Okay, and just next to her in the green.
Good morning, Alice Tidy for Euractiv. I want to go back briefly to the Ukraine fund. Has the US indicated that it plans to participate in this fund? Because I understand they stopped all donations to Ukraine a couple of years ago, so will they put money on the table? And then second question, apart from this fund, which could be one of the main deliverables of the summit, what does, with 3 weeks away, what does a successful summit outcome look to you?
For me, the most important thing is that, and again, I think you can already see it today from the G7 statement, is that the Western world, all NATO allies are completely committed to make sure that Ukraine maintains its position in the fight against Russia, is able to defend itself, is able whenever it comes to peace negotiations, to have these negotiations from a position of strength. That's what we are aiming for. When it comes to the money part, the US has been very clear that they continue to provide all the essential help for Ukraine as they have been doing in the past, including when it comes to weapon systems only the US can provide. For example, when it comes to the air defense systems from Patriot and other systems. And this is this Pearl program, which is paid for by European and Canadian allies. So I think the US rightly said, we are not going to put in the money there. Sometimes you have Congress deciding on amounts of money for Ukraine, but when it comes to the big money needed in bucks, big sums of money needed for Ukraine, it's coughed up by the Europeans and Canada, but crucial that the US keeps on supplying that. Even today, with all the pressure when it comes also on the United States to make sure that they can maintain all theaters they are active in, this vital support of interceptors continues flowing into Ukraine, but paid for by Europeans and Canada. Now, I try to answer that to saying, for me, the successful outcome is that there is an absolute ironclad commitment by the whole of the alliance, as we did in The Hague, and what you've seen since The Hague, with the Pillar program, with all the support still going into Ukraine. Ukraine also sharing more and more of their battlefield insights with the Europeans, Canada, and the United States, for example, through our joint center in Poland, JTEC. But also other ways to basically share all these insights when it comes to drone technology and modern warfighting, where NATO also can learn, of course, and Ukraine can still learn from NATO. So this is exchanging all these insights. It is still investing in Ukraine's defense industrial base, making sure the Czech ammunition initiative is up and running, Pearl is up and running, making sure that all the bilateral support is there, and particularly focused on the concrete needs of Ukraine. So not just on what countries might be able to provide, but really reacting to and acting on the concrete demands from Ukraine when it comes to what they need to stay strong.
Coming over here, second row, Deutsche Welle.
Ksenia
Morning.
Polska, morning, it's still morning, I'm checking. Ksenia Polska, Deutsche Welle, Russian-Ukrainian Service. Secretary General, considering the need for the European allies to take over more responsibility from the United States and invest more in their own defense, how do you make sure this does not compete with continuous military support to Ukraine?
It doesn't, to be honest. I think we can do it. It has to be and everybody realizes that on the one hand, we have to make sure that the support for Ukraine is there in terms of the money needed to get the weapon systems, to make sure we produce them on time if we do not have them in our stockpiles. But at the same time, making sure that we build up as rapidly as possible our own. I think, are you from Poland yourself?
No, I'm from Ukraine.
You're from Ukraine? But I think, well, Ukraine, of course, is a case in point that you, under immense pressure of a full war effort, where so many Ukrainians are paying the ultimate price, that you were able to maintain the country in that fight against an adversary which is much bigger. Now, maintaining this fight than the First World War, 4.5 years now, is testament of your immense resilience. But when you look at Poland, for example, it's also clear Poland is rapidly ramping up its defense production, is rapidly ramping up its defense expenditure, making sure that they can defend themselves. At the same time, they continue their support for Ukraine. So, just one example, sorry, I thought you were from Poland, but Poland as an example of how this support is maintained.
Okay, we're nearly out of time, but we'll take just a few more questions. We'll come to the center here in the third row.
Hi, good morning.
I insist it's morning. Alexandra Filipenko, The Breakfast Show, a Russian independent media in exile in Lithuania. So Ukraine is now successfully striking deep inside Russia thanks to its own technologies. But in Washington, especially after the Sunday talks with President Zelensky and with Putin, Washington expressed that those strikes might hinder peace talks. What does NATO want? To Ukraine to continue the pressure or to hold back for those talks?
Well, let's start with answering the question why Ukraine is doing this. This is because Ukraine, on the 23rd, 24th of February 2022, was confronted with a Russia which started a full-scale invasion. Of course, after already in 2014 starting the war with capturing Crimea. And this was unprovoked, totally reckless. And of course, Ukraine has to defend itself. This is what we all think and find and do, and try Ukraine to help with. And I think the G7 statement yesterday, signed by all the heads of state and government present in this beautiful French town, is very clear on this. So maybe I can just refer to the statement. And I think it gives you the clarity that we agree on this, that we have to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to stay strong.
All right, fourth row over here.
Good day, Lana Gidošević from Blitz Television from Serbia.
Morning.
Last week, NATO stated that security situation in Kosovo is stable, allowing the adjustment of optimization of the KFOR mission. What does that exactly mean? And does that mean in the ground? And what the situation is going to look like, especially if we speak about Serbian minority in North Kosovo?
Yeah, so a good question. When you look at the security situation in Kosovo, what we're seeing over the last years is that it has continued to improve. So that's good news. And that is why NATO ceased in January the deployment of reserve forces to the Kosovo force. And this is after 2 years of continuous rotation. And at the same time, we are constantly looking at what is the best posture for KFOR going forward. At this moment, you see that KFOR has an overall size of about 4,700 troops. What we will do is go back to the pre-2023 levels. Of course, and depending on the circumstances, you will see a KFOR going forward with between 3,000 and 3,500 troops. And that is, I think, reflecting the improved security situation, where the KFOR mission, of course, stays absolutely focused on its core mission.
Coming to the first row here.
Good morning, Secretary General. Ida Hallikainen for Ilta-Sanomat, Finland. President of Finland, Alexander Stubb, has spoken about reopening channels of communication with Russia. Last week, he said that contact should be established within the coming months. What is your view on this, and what might a future dialogue with Russia look like?
Yeah, clearly this is something debated among allies, absolutely. You also see this discussion in the European Union. Of course, the President of Finland is also participating in those discussions, the Prime Minister and the President. At the moment, this is not a discussion we are having in NATO at the political level. It's really a discussion playing out in the EU at the moment. Of course, we are following that and will be supportive wherever we can.
Okay, final question. Second row here, gentleman in the blue jacket.
Daniel Tkia, Ukrainian TV. Does Ukraine have a stronger hand right now, both at the negotiating table and on the battlefield? And after this G7 summit this week, is President Trump moving closer to Ukraine's position? What is your feeling? Are you more positive about US position in that?
Well, to be honest, I've always been positive about the US position, because I always felt and still think and have the conviction that it is only the United States who was able to break the deadlock originally when President Trump came back into office last year, February. He consistently has been working with his team, with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, with Pete Hegseth, to do everything possible to bring this terrible war to an end. When you look at the battlefield situation, obviously it has changed somewhat in terms that Russia is not making advances at the moment on the battlefield, it seems, and you are doing well in the battle. It's not that you are getting big pieces of land back, but at least the front line is more stable, and the advances by the Russians have been halted much more than, let's say, 2 or 3 months ago. So of course that's important, and we are seeing that you are able, as Ukraine, to kill or seriously wound between 30 and 35,000 Russians a month, which are really impressive numbers. Of course, terrible for the families, etc., of all the men in the Russian armed forces. But hey, Ukraine didn't ask for them. Eh? You have to defend yourself. So this is what happens in wartime, and you are extremely successful in doing this. And that means that Russia has more and more problems to refill all those gaps in their armed forces necessary to maintain the fight in Ukraine. And the numbers, when you compare them, I said it before, it's really staggering, because 30 to 35,000, that's basically in 3 weeks what the Russians lost in Afghanistan in the 1980s, in 10 years. They now lose in 3 weeks. It is in 5 weeks what America had in casualties in Vietnam in 15 years. In 5 weeks now, Russia is losing those numbers in Ukraine, in fighting Ukraine. So on all these fronts, I think Ukraine is really doing better. But still, I think we all want this war done and to bring it to a peace deal. But to get there, you need two to tango. Your president is willing to tango, is willing to get to a negotiating table, but clearly the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, so far is not. And here the American president is, I think, playing a very positive role now for a year and a half in trying to get this war done. He wants to get it done, and I completely support him.
All right, that's all we have time for now, but we will be back this afternoon with the Prime Minister of Latvia. You can join us very early tomorrow morning for the doorstep before the ministerial meeting, after the ministerial tomorrow afternoon.
At that gravely early hour.
7:10. We'll see you then. All right, thanks everyone.
See you later. Thanks.